Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film American Sniper. It is based on Chris Kyle, who was the most lethal sniper in U.S. history. Out of 255 probable kills, he had 160 confirmed kills. But also, that after he came back and had a lot of PTSD after his 4 tours in Iraq, ended up helping out various other vets who had PTSD and working with a lot of them and writing a book and becoming more than just the guy who was the most lethal sniper in U.S. history. Chances are, if you've heard about this film, you've heard about him being the most lethal sniper in U.S. history, but you didn't hear the other part. And that's kind of how this film really is. It's more concerned with the lethal sniper part, but it still feels like it has to acknowledge the stuff with his wife and his kids and the PTSD. Almost feels like it's like dragged kicking and screaming to do it and not understanding how to do that with much of a point. Whereas doing everything with him as a sniper is done with a lot of care and finesse and filmmaking. The other stuff, if you know anything about Clint Eastwood's way of directing films, feels like the quick 1 or 2 take kind of idea that he's used to, and it really reflects that in those scenes. Whereas when he's in any of his tours of duty, it feels like it has a lot more finesse. It feels like Eastwood's far more into that. It's not really technically, I would say, a biopic in the traditional Oscar prestige sense. It is very comparable to Selma and The Imitation Game and The Theory of Everything, but it's more concerned with him being a soldier. Everything that's set up from his childhood is there to kind of set up his mentality and the kind of person he is. It is kind of more of a character piece, kind of biopic, kind of mashup kind of thing, which really actually works for it at the beginning, and you see him go join the Navy and become a Navy SEAL and go through training and then eventually be sent to the Iraq War and meet his wife before he gets sent to the Iraq War, and they get married and have children also between his tours in the Iraq War. And you see as he goes, as he becomes more and more of a legend, as he is one of the more lethal snipers, and sometimes he's sent out with other snipers and he kills more people than all the other snipers combined. He's a very impressive sniper, but also gets into the kind of man he was, how he wanted to help out soldiers, how he wanted to make sure less and less people died, but the horrific things sometimes, like the scene you saw in the trailer, if you've seen the trailer with the kid, that he had to do that, and then also the PTSD that left him a vacant man when he came home and eventually become the guy who helped out various vets after his tours in Iraq. I've seen a lot of war movies from all the wars that we had motion pictures during. The kind of film this is something that came really out of World War II, and the idea of someone being a notable figure from that war and making a film about them, and the main thing about the film is how great of a person this person is. When I say that, you're probably thinking that sounds pessimistic, and I'm not actually being a dick about this. It's just a matter of fact. That's the kind of film this is. These films often are kind of made in a propaganda way. I don't want to say this film is really trying to be propaganda. What Clint Eastwood is doing here is he almost kind of doesn't know how to come to the moral complexities of this character. And he seems like a really complex, interesting character. That's why Bradley Cooper really wanted to play him. In fact, Bradley Cooper's the reason this movie got made. He tried to get David O. Russell to do it. He tried to get Steven Spielberg to do it. And then he eventually got Clint Eastwood to direct it. The thing with what Clint Eastwood did here is he takes like those movies that they marathon on Turner Classic Movies during Memorial Day. They're kind of simplistic in a way because that's how people wanted to view the war. With American Sniper, it almost feels like Clint Eastwood doesn't want to get into the moral complexities of this character. He just wants to make a good old-fashioned war picture, because Clint Eastwood is very much a Republican, and this is very much a conservative, middle America kind of a movie that people are going to classify it as him trying to lean on his politics. I think he is a little bit. What Clint Eastwood did is he took the easy way out. He found an out, and he used the kind of films that he clearly likes. Those man's movies they play on the military channel. You kind of have to understand the context to media. I don't mind watching those movies, but I understand the context to them. And it almost felt like Clint Eastwood didn't understand the complexities of why he was using it. I think he used it because he didn't want to get into the complexities of this character as much. Like, he knew he couldn't. Thus why the whole thing with the PTSD is kind of like maligned. Almost like if they had cut all that out, I think we would have had a much better movie. It's nothing to do with the performances, just on a pure story level, that totally falls flat, and it hurts the movie tremendously. Whereas all the stuff in Iraq, I felt like I knew all the characters. I knew more of what was going on. There was more of a filmmaking sense to it. It felt like Eastwood was more into those parts. I know Eastwood shoots very quickly. It almost felt like he didn't take the time to really think about what the script was doing and just shot all this stuff and didn't realize what the point of what he was initially making would be, and kind of took easy outs. And especially none of the civilians they run into or people they have to kill are treated in any way other than a villain. And there's especially this other sniper character, Mustafa, who was a gold medalist in, I think, archery, and he is Chris Kyle's archenemy in this film. And he's always like at odds with this guy. But you don't really understand that character. And it almost feels like what John Wayne did when he directed Green Berets with the Vietnam War. Direct a Vietnam movie like a World War II movie, and it felt grossly inappropriate. Certainly we've had other films try to do that with like Lone Survivor. With American Sniper, it feels like he thought this was how you make a war movie and this is the best way to do it, and going at it in a different way, which is kind of how they should have done it. It's like acknowledging what Catherine Bigelow's done with Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker, but not really understanding the morals behind them, just understanding the style. The film I saw that this reminds me a lot of is Darby's Rangers, which isn't a great movie, but that film was called propaganda at its time, and I think this film is really influenced by propaganda. I don't think it's trying to be propaganda. You could still have a kind of a pro-Republican kind of message if you'd done this in the right way. They don't get into the moral complexities of the war whatsoever, or should we be in that Iraq war. This film is hurt because of that. So what they're doing is trying to find a box to fit this story in, and they don't really care if there's things that aren't fitting in the box. They're just like, it fits pretty good, right? And in certain spots it does fit really good in the box, in kind of like a war, like this guy's so great message. And the parts where he's like in Iraq and those action sequences and those sequences where he is being a sniper can be really intense. But others, like the scene in the trailer, the first time I saw it, because I had seen that trailer a lot of times, because I go to the movies a lot if you didn't know, didn't have the impact. And even the second time didn't have the impact. Other times it did have a lot of impact, and I thought it was edited very well, and it showed me a Clint Eastwood I haven't seen through his other movies. In those scenes he was a much better director than I've seen him be in a while, because J. Edgar was awful and The Hereafter wasn't very good, and I didn't even bother with Jersey Boys. He still has his little desaturation thing. He didn't do as much desaturation. He always desaturates the stuff. I feel like it's in his contract somewhere that he has to be allowed to desaturate it in post-production to a certain degree, but not as much. I actually thought color-wise it looked a little better for Eastwood, which is not a compliment. Bradley Cooper is very good as Chris Kyle. I was thinking when I was watching this, was like, wow, 2014 has been the year of Bradley Cooper playing roles that a year before I would not have thought Bradley Cooper could play. American Sniper and Guardians of the Galaxy are not like Bradley Cooper roles. They're not like when someone says Bradley Cooper, I'm going to think of The Hangover and American Hustle and Silver Linings Playbook. Although he's a very talented actor, and I think this year has shown that he can actually be a chameleon actor for a kind of a pretty boy leading man. I don't think a lot of people thought he could do that, and this cements it even more so. It feels like an interesting evolution since those Hangover films. He's a loner who cares about his fellow man and is very internal, but is able to come through all that and be kind of warm also. He's a complex character, but Bradley Cooper does play it very well. When a director uses a genre or uses a format or a structure, you kind of have to wonder, what's this filmmaker doing with it? I've never seen a filmmaker use a structure or a format or a genre as an easy out, because this film probably should go more into what he did with the vets and how he was killed, and it just glosses over it very quickly. Why have it in there if you're going to treat it this way? Whereas you're going to treat all his stuff about being the deadliest sniper in US history as like the coolest shit in the world. You can tell when a director is into something. And like a great example of how he's not into it is that scene with Bradley Cooper's holding his newborn baby girl, and it looks like a doll, and it looks like he's basically like trying to move the doll so it looks like it's a live baby, which was weird. I kept thinking like, oh, I guess child labor laws and they had to do a lot of takes or something, and it kind of shows Clint Eastwood's lack of giving a shit about what Chris Kyle did outside of the battlefield. That is an important part of the story, an important part of who the man was. This is a film that almost felt like Eastwood didn't want to get into it and couldn't understand how that dealt with the moral complexities of the war. Whether that war was right or wrong almost doesn't play into that. It's more just about war itself. And you really could have done that if you just maybe spent some time on it and like cared a little bit more. Unfortunately, I don't think Clint Eastwood did care enough to really let American Sniper be the real story of Chris Kyle. You just get the legend, and this is a print the legend kind of scenario. This is like a John Wayne kind of a movie. And Clint Eastwood, I've always thought of him as kind of like the successor to the John Wayne throne. And I think he succeeds in continuing to do that, but it doesn't show somebody who's really thinking about the morals of it. They're just thinking about how they can get this story to work and wrap up in a nice little bow. And Chris Kyle's life doesn't do that. You know, it's a more complex life, and he's a more complex person, and you'd probably think more about the complexities of war had this story been told in the real way it should have, but unfortunately it wasn't. So what we get is somebody trying to tell something complex in a more simplified way. For a lot of this film, it actually kind of succeeds in doing that. When it really counts and wants to be in the emotion, it should be more than, you know, time between action sequences. Within this film, it shows someone who's too simple-minded in his storytelling to really tell a full story, because you need to understand morals, you need to understand what you're doing with your genre and your format. And he doesn't get that, especially with this story. He needs to understand that, and he clearly was just not really the right director for it. In the battle scenes, he was, and if this was just him being the lethal sniper, sure, I think it got that fairly well. But everything in terms of the morals and like what it's saying about war and about this person, I think it really failed at. It just wants to show you a really cool, you know, Midwest kind of conservative, simple-minded, this guy is great kind of war movie. And it shows that Eastwood maybe needs to spend a little bit more time shooting it in the editing room, because it's not for the lack of talent with Eastwood, it's really for the lack of giving a shit that continues to hurt his movies, even when he makes probably one of his better ones I've seen in recent memory. So if you have seen American Sniper and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.